So I finally got around to playing all of the Fire Emblem games on the Nintendo Switch 2 backwards compatible. So Fire Emblem Warriors, Fire Emblem Three Houses, Fire Emblem Warriors Three Hopes, and Fire Emblem Engage. And I wanted to go through and see if there were any major changes overall. The Nintendo Switch 2 was a very interesting system because it doesn't take a straightforward path to backwards compatibility like previous Nintendo systems have done. It's essentially emulation with a little bit of hardware oomph as well. So essentially what you're getting here is that you're getting a lot of games that if they didn't run good before on the Nintendo Switch 1 or had dips, it actually could bump it up to locking it down in 30 frames per second, or even bumping it up to 60 frames per second, or at least targeting 60 frames. And a lot of the times you're going to get a cleaner look when you play docked. Now, another thing here, guys, is that while I did play portable mode with all of these different games, it's a little bit blurrier at times. It just kind of depends on, I guess, your eyes or just how you see things, just because of the way that the backwards compatibility is done. So also keep that in mind, but you still get all of the performance, just natural updates, because none of these games have gotten a patch at all. So we're going to go in order that the games came out in, and I'm going to give you guys my overall thoughts now that I went back and played every single Fire Emblem game on the Nintendo Switch 2 via the backwards compatibility. And the results might surprise you guys here. Now, I'm not going to be going in depth into technical frame rate graphs and stuff. I'm a gamer. I just tell you guys how I feel when I play the game. I remember how they felt when I first played it, and I'm giving you guys my updated impressions now in terms of what I feel, although I will be referencing some information that we do have out there when it comes to just the baseline information of frame rate and resolution, and if there was dips or problems beforehand. So Fire Emblem games are kind of notorious for some of that stuff, but once again, we'll get into it more here. So let's start off with Fire Emblem Warriors. Now, this game was interesting because this was the first Fire Emblem game on the Nintendo Switch 1, and this game actually offered a 60 FPS mode. Essentially what they did here is that you can play the game at 1080p 30 frames per second if you want to be able to play that. That's the quality mode. But then they also offered a 60 frames per second mode as well at a 720p resolution. Now, I played the original 30 FPS mode back on Switch 1, and it did not feel great at all for a Fire Emblem Warriors game. So the first thing that I did was like, okay, let me first start out playing it in the 30 FPS quality mode, and it actually felt better to play. You can tell that the frame rate was a bit lower overall, but it felt kind of smooth to play, and it wasn't as bad as I remember when I was playing the game in 2017 and throughout 2018. It felt a bit better and smoother to play here in the 30 FPS mode, and you could tell there was a bit more quality on the graphics overall. It did look better when it comes to that compared to what we're going to talk about here with the 60 FPS mode. So I was actually surprised of how much better it felt to play at the 30 FPS mode this time than when I first played it, which was surprising because I did not like it at all. However, I did switch it over to the 60 FPS mode, and that mode is clearly better. The response timing, the fluidity of the game, the combos, everything just gels. It's such a fast, arcadey type of game. I actually had quite a bit of fun going into one of the chapters, one of like the history chapters or whatever it was, where you just have to fight endless waves of enemies and commanders and stuff like that. So I just did that, and it was actually pretty fun to go through and play. It's got some slick controls, cool combat, and a lot of fun overall. I didn't really switch with the characters and all that. I just wanted to get a base of how the game was compared to how it was before when I first played it, but I was impressed by how much fun it is to just go in there and hack and slash stuff up. So I actually have to give it an S ranking overall for Fire Emblem Warriors when it comes to the backwards compatibility. I liked it a lot. Everything felt smooth and fast, and it already had a 60 FPS mode on the Nintendo Switch 1, but it even feels a bit smoother and better now when I'm playing on the Nintendo Switch 2, especially in the 30 FPS mode, quality mode, and of course in the 60 FPS mode. So definitely a good game to go back and play if you're looking at playing a backwards compatible title, although once again, it already was 60 FPS on the Nintendo Switch 1 if you wanted to do that. And when you play in 60 FPS, you can tell the drop in quality when it comes to the models and the graphics and the resolution and stuff. You can clearly tell that. So there was that. But overall, like I said, it still played great in both modes, which was surprising overall. So Fire Emblem Warriors, definitely good. But let's go to move on to the next thing here. And this game is very interesting, and that is Fire Emblem Three Houses. Now, originally this game ran at about 1080p and 30 FPS, but if you've played the game, you know that the graphics look a bit rough. So yes, while 1080p still looked a bit rough, a bit jaggy at times, and that look is still retained here. Now, when it comes to the frame rate, the problem with Fire Emblem Three Houses on the Switch 1 was that while it ran at a steady 30 frames most of the time, anytime that you locked in for combat, like you zoomed in to go to fight or to hit someone, especially when you used a combat art, so like a special technique, there would be some frame rate drops. Now, was it that big of a deal back then? Well, no, not really, because the game is turn-based anyway, so it didn't really matter. It's not like you were controlling somebody in real time, where if those frame rate drops were happening in, like, let's just say Fire Emblem Warriors, yeah, that'd be an issue. Or like, for example, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Yeah, that's an issue when you have massive frame rate drops and problems there. But back then, it wasn't really too big of a problem. Now, what I noticed here, I did multiple combat arts and I did multiple different special attacks, and I didn't see the hitching that I felt before. So it's one of those things to where you can test it out yourself. Maybe it's a little bit different for you, but largely this game runs and looks the same for the most part. There wasn't really too much of a benefit. Maybe there's a bit faster loading. Same thing with Fire Emblem Warriors. Maybe there's a bit faster loading with it because I have it all installed digitally on a micro SD Express card. This is an ONN Express card. From what I understood here, it looks like the loading was maybe a little bit faster on pretty much all the games that we're going to talk about. But yeah, it did seem like it did remove the hitching from the combat arts whenever you got into battles on Fire Emblem Three Houses. So that's essentially all you're getting. This game needs a free update to address, I would say, the 30 FPS overall and the look of the game, the graphics, and making that look better on your Nintendo Switch 2. But before we move to the next game, if you're enjoying these type of videos, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you are someone new, and let me know what your favorite Fire Emblem game is in the comment section below. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next game here, and we're going to be talking about Fire Emblem Warriors Three Hopes, one of my favorites. And this game is also, I say it all the time, another interesting game because it does a lot of really good things, I would say gameplay wise and structure wise, over Fire Emblem Warriors, and even over stuff like Age of Calamity or Hyrule Warriors. I like a lot of the stuff in this game. Now, this game originally ran at 1080p docked, and in portable mode it was a bit lower at 648p, and it was around 30 FPS when it comes to the frame rate. So it wasn't great with Fire Emblem Warriors Three Hopes, but the game was originally uncapped. So thankfully, they made it uncapped. Koei Tecmo made it uncapped, so we get the actual bump all the way up to 60 FPS. The game originally ran around 33 to 36 FPS on the Switch 1. Now it just runs at a locked 60. I was playing through it. I didn't feel too many other dips or anything, and graphically speaking, it looked fantastic. It holds that 1080p for the most part, so you're getting a 1080p 60 FPS game. There's no quality or performance mode or anything. It's just one mode that you play, and this game is packed full of great characters, great content, a really cool what-if story for the Fire Emblem Warriors style of game. Pretty much all of them are kind of like what-ifs when it comes to the Warriors games, but with this one, it's a really interesting take on the Three Houses characters and all that, and the what-if scenario there, where Byleth is essentially the bad guy in the game, so it's pretty cool to play through. Now, I did feel that it wasn't quite as silky smooth when it comes to the button response and input timing as I felt with Fire Emblem Warriors. Now, this was probably the case with the original Switch 1 as well. Fire Emblem Warriors just feels a bit faster or more arcadey to play, and Fire Emblem Warriors Three Hopes feels a bit more grounded, although there is super fast arcadey stuff, but the lock-on system, the strafing, the dodging, the hits, the impact definitely feel a bit more methodical than it was with Fire Emblem Warriors originally. So there is that difference, but when it comes to the graphics and when it comes to just the way that the game looks, Fire Emblem Warriors Three Hopes definitely gets a nice look on the Nintendo Switch 2. I was pretty happy with that in comparison to Fire Emblem Warriors, and the frame rate ran super smooth for me. I didn't feel any dips or anything. They might be there, but for the most part, I didn't really see it, and the game loads super fast. It already loaded really fast on the Nintendo Switch 1, but now it just loads just as fast, maybe even a notch faster. So pretty impressed originally, and maybe they knew that this game would be able to be played on the Switch 2 at the time. I think Koei Tecmo knew, so they just said, let's uncap this baby. Something might happen in the future. So, yeah, I was pretty happy with Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes overall. It's still a great game to go back and play. But let's go to move on to the final game here when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 1 Fire Emblem games backwards compatibility, and that is Fire Emblem Engage. Now, this game is kind of like the worst out of all of them when it comes to how I felt playing it, the response and everything. Maybe Fire Emblem, I would say Fire Emblem Three Houses, maybe, but this game definitely felt like it needs a Nintendo Switch 2 free patch update. Now, originally, the game looks better, so graphically, it looks better than pretty much all the other Fire Emblem games on the Nintendo Switch. Now, art style wise, you might disagree or agree with that. It's right below 1080p when docked, so it's right below that. So Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes has the bit of an edge there overall when it comes to just the resolution, because it doesn't quite look as good when it comes to Fire Emblem Engage. And if you're looking at the frame rate, it's still 30 FPS. It's pretty much there, it's locked in, so it kind of moves, and it doesn't quite look as smooth as it should, especially with that type of art style. You'd like to see it move a bit more smoothly. It feels a bit more jarring compared to even Three Houses, because the art style kind of fits that type of game. If that even makes any sense at all, just kind of fits it a bit more with that art style. But with this one, you would expect it to kind of be like a 60 FPS type of game, and it really just doesn't do that. But I will say this, there are some frame hitching whenever you transition, just like Fire Emblem Three Houses. There is some frame hitching when you go from the map to the battle screen, and I didn't necessarily notice it too much originally, but with this one, I didn't see anything at all. Now, I'm looking back through the footage. If it's there, then you guys can let me know, but it did feel smoother overall when it comes to the loading into the battles, and anytime that you do like a special attack or something, I didn't feel any hitches or anything like that. But this game probably needs a Nintendo Switch 2 edition, or it needs a free update. I do think that free updates would probably be better for the two games that I mentioned with Fire Emblem Three Houses and Fire Emblem Engage, just because there's no need to really re-put this one on a cartridge and do all that. There's not going to be any extra content or anything like that. So essentially, a free update would be good for both of those. Fire Emblem Warriors and Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes, those ones are good, but Engage felt just a bit crusty overall at the 30, and I'm hoping that they do a free update for the game, because it's a great game. When it comes to the gameplay and when it comes to the content in the game, it is fantastic. I love Fire Emblem Engage. I think it's really good, but a bit smoother gameplay would be nice for it. Now, it's not a deal breaker at all, because it is a turn-based RPG once again, and of course the priority in terms of getting the frame rate for the Fire Emblem games was on the action-oriented type of thing. So overall, if I had to pick a winner when it comes to the Fire Emblem games on the Nintendo Switch 2, or what you should play if you have all of them, the first one to play, I would probably say it's a tie, or I would say Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes, because running at a solid 1080p, running at 60 FPS, it looks and feels great to play. I was actually kind of surprised when I first booted it up, and I was like, oh wow, that looks considerably better. Dude, the 60 FPS just makes it move in motion better. Then I'd probably say Fire Emblem Warriors, the original game. That game is very fun, and it's super arcadey, pick up and play. You could knock out stuff while watching baseball or watching sports or watching whatever else you want to watch on TV. So I'd say that. And once again, Three Houses and Fire Emblem Engage, both of those games need a little bit of work and a free update. So I'm hoping that they do that in the future. But those are my thoughts on all the Fire Emblem games when it comes to backwards compatibility on the Nintendo Switch 2. Do you plan on going back and playing any of these awesome Fire Emblem games? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.